I didn't feel comfortable calling myself a writer. I still don't. So that's where I feel kind of like a fraud sometimes because I only started writing to create roles for myself. But I would say, I don't know, I'm not really a writer. And that's even something that in the last year and a half, I've had to say, I'm a writer. I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a producer. So I think those labels are huge. Giving yourself permission to give yourself those categorizations are so important. Whether it's how you have those conversations with people when you say who you are and what you do, whether it's, you're filling a form on a website and it says, what do you do? And you fill out that box, whether it's on your, taxes for God's sake or whatever, like what's your business? What's your personal business? Actor, writer, producer, storyteller, comedian. Do it. Put it on there. I think that's really important.
You're listening to The Creative Impostor, episode number 47. Welcome to The Creative Impostor. I'm Andrea Klunder, and today I'm bringing you my third and final, for now, interview in the theme of social justice and authentically being an ally. Today I'm talking with Fawzia Mirza, who is an actor, writer, producer, and like many other things. But I recorded this interview over a year ago in early 2016, and then just never edited and released it. Why? I have no idea, because it is a fantastic interview with someone who I have known for a long time and deeply admire and respect. And she is so witty and wise and wonderful. I don't know why I sat on this interview. But then when I decided to do the theme this month, I realized that the reason I sat on it is because even though we were having this conversation over a year ago, it is completely relevant to this particular theme. And this is the exact right moment to release it. Not just because of my theme, but because Fawzia right now is actually traveling all around the world to promote and attend screenings for her brand new film called Signature Move. And Signature Move has been accepted to 88 film festivals and is having its home premiere in Chicago this weekend, if you're listening to this in real time, Thursday, September 28th, and it is running on a limited run at the Music Box Theater until October 5th. So if it is not yet October 5th, 2017, you are definitely going to want to go grab tickets for this film. And if you're not in Chicago, it's playing like so many different festivals and so many different places that you should definitely go to the website signaturemovemovie.com. And of course, it'll be linked in the show notes for this episode at thecreativeimpostor.com/048. And you can find out where else it'll be playing. So what exactly is Signature Move? It is a hilarious and heartfelt look at modern families and the complexities of love in its many forms. Zainab, and I have no idea if I'm saying that right, Fawzia, is a 30-something Pakistani Muslim lesbian lawyer living in Chicago, played by Fawzia Mirza, who begins a romance with Alma, a confident Mexican-American woman. Zainab's recently widowed mother, Parveen, has moved in and spends her days watching Pakistani TV dramas while searching for a potential husband for her only daughter. Alma's mother, Rosa, is a former professional luchadora, which Zainab finds fascinating as she has recently taken up lucha-style wrestling, training with a former pro wrestler, Jade. Zainab tries to keep both her love life and her wrestling a secret from her Muslim mother, who knows more than she lets on. So there's all kinds of themes here in this film, which are coming partly from Fawzia's own personal experience as a Pakistani Muslim queer woman who has definitely experienced coming out and both the opportunities and fallout that comes with, and is featured in this particular series of interviews because she is an activist, a voice for social change. She is somebody who is changing the cultural narrative through her art and through her creative work and through expressing her own identity in these various media. Signature Move is definitely not the first project Fawzia has ever worked on. There are many that we will list in the show notes and that you can find at her website. I actually met Fawzia so long ago when I was doing more theater and film work. When I was the founder and artistic director for Chicago Scriptworks, she did a number of original screenplay readings, and she even starred in this very weird, short, late-night theater piece that I directed. I don't even know how many years ago when I was thinking about applying to theater school as a director. So I knew Fawzia way back and have been following her career, and am so impressed and inspired by everything that she's doing. Just to name a few, of course, there's Signature Move, which she co-wrote, produced, and starred in. She co-created, co-wrote, and starred in a crazy web series, which you can find on YouTube, called Cam Kardashian, about the long-lost gay Kardashian sister. Also, a web series called Brown Girl Problems. She also produced, co-created, and starred in the mockumentary The Muslim Trump, about the Muslim illegitimate daughter of Donald Trump, and got featured in Marie Claire, Vice, Jezebel, and has done a bunch of theater and experimental film work. Honestly, you just need to go to the show notes and link to Fawzia's website where you can find all the details about her creative work. And just as a side note, I want to remind you that since we recorded this in early 2016, there's a number of cultural references that may seem a little outdated, like why are we talking about #Oscars so white, the Coen brothers film, and that is why. And it's still relevant. And in fact, I actually have a bonus rant for you in which Fawzia talks about how she feels about the Coldplay video that came out, I think at the end of 2015, Hymn for the Weekend, featuring Beyonce, which takes place in India. And it's an interesting take on cultural appropriation and pop culture. And so that is not included in this episode here. It is a bonus audio that you can get if you are on my email list. And how you can get that is to go to thecreativeimpostor.com/magic. And there you can put in your information. You will get an audio download of my Yoga Nidra creative visualization. And you will also get a link to the audio of Fawzia's bonus rant. And if you're already on the mailing list, never fear. If you haven't already, you'll be getting a link to that in your email soon. Again, that's thecreativeimpostor.com/magic. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to take you straight to my conversation with actor, writer, producer, and my friend, Fawzia Mirza. I'm super excited to be having this conversation because I feel like you're one of those people I can say, I knew her when.
I thought we were going to say that I am the biggest creative imposter you know.
Ooh, possibly. I mean, how would you like to own that title? Why would you call yourself that?
Oh, who knows? It feels like that it's adding layers and layers to the conversation ahead.
Yeah, so we met, it must be like more than 10 years ago.
Has it been that long?
I think so, because it was back in the days when I was producing something called Chicago Scriptworks, which was a forum for screenwriters to workshop their scripts with actors and directors in front of an audience. I think that was when we first met.
Oh, right. And wasn't I still a lawyer then?
I think, yes. I was
acting at night and, learning things and going to stuff.
Lawyer by day, actor by night.
Yeah. Yeah, because so that was probably, maybe 2006 or 7 or something. Yeah. Wow. That's insane.
Mm-hmm. And you still had like long hair.
That's, what's funny is I feel as though, we all have those, I don't know what you'd call them, but those moments in time that are really defining for each of our lives, right? And they're very symbolic. They're very memorable. So, one of them for me is when I was a lawyer. One of them for me is when I had long hair. But what's really interesting is I almost feel like people are more fascinated now by the fact that I had long hair versus I was a lawyer. Like the long hair is way more crazy to people now. They're just like, what? I can't even imagine. Like, well, okay, cool. And now people are divided in my life in terms of, the people who knew me then versus the people who didn't. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, it's just definitely one of those timestamps on life. And like you are in those files versus those files.
So tell me more about short hair Fawzia and who you are now and what you're up to.
Well, right now, if someone were to ask me, like you just did, I would say that I'm acting, writing, producing, I guess making some comedy and doing that full time. That, my sort of artistic mission is to break down stereotypes across my different identities, across race and gender and sexual orientation. And, because I identify as a Pakistani Muslim queer woman. And also I love to use comedy to dispel all those stereotypes. And I like to break down the concept of the model minority when we're creating characters and telling stories. I've made short films. I've made some web series. I'm making my first feature film. I've done some storytelling. I've done some stand-up comedy. I've produced some documentary work. I'm basically like, what can I do? How can I do it? How many lives can I have? How can I be like a cat? Or a cat robot? Because then I'd have 9 lives and not get tired.
I was just going to say, where do you find the energy to do all of these things? Like if somebody would say, oh, what's Fawzia working on now? There wouldn't be like one project that you're working on. There'd be like a list of things. So where do you find the energy to do all of this? And I mean, it wasn't always this way, right? There was a point when you transitioned from long hair lawyer by day, actor by night to doing this full time. So where has this momentum come from and how do you maintain it?
I often don't understand where my energy comes from. I mean, I definitely think, part of it is like, I think we all have different kinds of personalities. Our brains are all very different. And I think when we understand how our brains work best or how other people's brains work, we can have a better relationship with ourselves because then we can, we can like cut ourselves slack, but then we can also use how our brains work to our advantage. And then when we understand how other people's brains work and that they are optimal in different ways, then we also cut other people's slack and we can have better relationships with them, right? Like, we're all weird in our own ways. So like some people operate in this way where they're like really, really great at talking about 3 things and they're experts in those things. And if you can understand that, then the other things that they may not be as good at or they might be socially awkward about, it doesn't bother you as much, if that makes sense. I definitely think my brain is just like loves to operate a mile a minute and I love to absorb information. I'm an extrovert in many ways and I think it kind of runs in our family, but I don't think that means that it was always used creatively. I think, when I was in college, all of that energy that I had, I like to call it my mania or my insanity or my weirdness or whatever. I think it was actually being channeled into just people and hanging out and going out and wanting to like be spontaneous and go on trips and, be like, yes, I'll show up at 5 a.m. and we'll go for breakfast. And then we'll spend all day, cleaning out your house. And then we're going to have like a binge session of watching all our favorite movies. And then we're going to have a sleepover and we're going to make nachos at 4 a.m. and then do it all over again or take a nap, so it was channeled differently. And I think, and I had all these ideas of what I'd love to do creatively or dream wise, but it wasn't actually until after law school that I started to find that. And I would say to channel the energy into actually being a creative person actively and intentionally. And I think also, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years has when I've really kind of harnessed who I am very intentionally and figured it out and putting it out there in the insane way, I guess, where there are so many projects going on at the same time, which, is that good or bad? I don't know. I mean, I love seeing people who, they're like, this is the one thing I'm doing right now, but they do it so well and it takes them a while and it's just beautiful perfection. It's just so, it's vibrating on every single level optimally. I would love to try that at some point, but that's definitely not where I'm at right now. And, I'm sure I'm a little ADD about stuff. And I think it's why, as I'm rambling, but I think it's also why being an actor, doing theater or making a movie is really conducive to the way I think, because you can do a project, you can act in a project or you can create a project and then, you can move on to something else. I mean, yes, if you're in the production of it or in the festival submissions of it or having to deal with getting it out to the world and disseminating it to the world, you still have to do that. But you also then can be like, oh, and now I can act in this thing, so you can go from thing to thing to thing. And in many ways, like being an actor, that's what you do. You move on. You have to move on and you have to let some things go in some way.
This is maybe kind of a weird question, but it just came into my mind as you're talking about having all these different projects that you're wanting to do and this unique viewpoint and voice that you have, because I don't think you could say that there are a lot of Pakistani Muslim queer women who are in the entertainment field right now who are creating work and creating art and creating these roles that sort of, have a comedic feel to them, but also have something to say and a message. Do you feel like there's something about capitalizing on now, like the moment now in time and in society where we are, where these dialogues are happening, these conversations around gender identity and around race and ethnicity and religion? And do you think that has anything to do with your momentum and your desire to create all of this work right now, that it's like this is a really ripe time that you're sort of riding that energy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I cannot deny this. It's like you can feel this really, really fast heartbeat moving in all of these arenas, and whether it's in film or TV or whether it's in our communities, like, my queer communities or my Pakistani communities or Muslim communities or the women communities. I mean, or even looking at what's happening politically right now. I mean, there just feels like things are moving so fast and these conversations are being had. And obviously technology is a huge part of what's shaping that and shifting it and moving it forward at such a high speed where people are able to connect across the globe and have these conversations in such a different way, right? Or have experiences with people or see a movie about somebody they've never seen before, whatever. But I definitely think that's very real. And I think for me, it's probably two things. I mean, one is the conversations are happening and I want to be a part of them. Two, I think it's also, I'm not an 18-year-old coming out of college, just starting my career or wanting to engage or feeling like everything is so fresh and new. I feel as though I've had this other career as a lawyer. I feel as though I have my own personal time. A clock is on me and that I have to do as much as possible because I wasted so much time doing these other things. And, wasted is probably not being really, gracious enough to my spirit and sense of self, but because I think I learned a lot going the path I did. But I feel as though I have to take advantage of every minute because I started later doing this than everybody else. And that I figured out so many things later than so many others. So, I don't have and this probably touches so much upon this whole idea of being a creative imposter. I mean, I don't have a film degree. I don't have a theater degree. I don't have, I have an English political science degree with a religious studies minor. I have a law degree. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of Illinois. Yet I don't have any of the arts degrees. I wasn't an actor with those communities, with those classes. I've never been properly trained in almost everything that I do. I took a year of Improv Olympic or IO in Chicago. Everything else has been these piecemeal classes, but never receiving either a degree or for a really long period of time even. So I just have these moments of information, so there's that. Or then, even coming out as a queer person, so there's the coming out as an actor, there's the coming out as a queer person, there's a coming out as feeling like this is what I look like now with the short hair and feeling confident that that's who I am because I feel most comfortable in this body. There's the coming out as being someone who lost over 50 pounds and having that transition of physical appearance transform who they are and how they exist and how they present in the world. And so there's all these things that I think that make me feel as though, oh, wow, I just started doing this 5 years ago. So there's that, all of that, which is a lot. And then, and then I think there is something to be said both in the business of being an actor or an artist or Hollywood, or even my own personal awareness of wanting to capitalize on the things I'm doing to make more things that I will do and am doing, is capitalizing on the momentum or the energy or the buzz. And some of that is external of other people that are seeing me and working with me, but a lot of it is internal. I mean, I'm driven by the people around me. I'm driven by what I see, but I'm also driven by my own excitement and energy. So I know I can get into lulls and creative depressions, and so I'm always sort of pushing myself to capitalize on all of it.
So it's sort of like, I think that sometimes holds people back of like, oh, I don't have the proper training for this, or oh, I'm not an actor. I'd really like to create this thing or have this idea, or I'd love to try this, but I'm not a real actor. It seems like in some ways that can almost be a benefit rather than something that holds you back, because if you had a formal theater education or a formal film degree, I don't know, sometimes I feel like then you can get too in your head and overthink things, and you're not somebody who is going to go on stage and perform traditional roles for, like white people that dominate most of the traditional theater liturgy. Like your work right now that you're doing is a lot of creating your own roles. And as you said, leveraging technology to do that and to get the work out there and sort of create your own path. So when I hear people say, oh, I'd really love to do this thing, but nobody would ever cast me to do that. Can you speak a little bit to how you've decided, or like how you go about creating a role for yourself and leveraging technology to make that happen rather than waiting for someone else to say, oh, here, can you do this thing? We choose you.
A couple things that come to mind. I mean, first of all, I think one of the greatest things anyone ever said to me was in Chicago. I think it was, I don't know, maybe, I don't even know now, 7-8 years ago. I went to a meeting for Rasika Theater, which was and still is a South Asian theater company in Chicago. And it was right when I was a lawyer. I had decided I was going to pursue acting. I had started taking some classes, but I was really uncomfortable with being called an actor. And I didn't know anything about it. I was just asking questions and showing up and learning, asking questions, putting in for like researching. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Who do I meet? So I went to this kind of it was a meeting for people interested, for actors, writers, artists, South Asian artists, to be part of this South Asian theater company. And I had a conversation where this one guy, he asked me, so what do you do? And I said, well, I guess, I haven't done anything yet, but I'm going to probably pursue being an actor, and I'm acting, but I'm not acting. And he just looked at me and he kind of laughed, and he was like, in college, he was in college at the time, he's probably like 20 years old. And he's like, oh, you're at that phase where you're not comfortable being like calling yourself an actor. Oh, I get it. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And he said, listen, you're an actor. You just have to call yourself that. That's all that matters. And I just started laughing, and it was so confusing and weird and uncomfortable and awesome, but really, really liberating, because after that moment, I realized that part of doing anything is defining yourself as doing that. And it really is a huge step, because it may seem silly or just a label or just a word, but it does something in your brain. I mean, it's really motivating and feels good. And I know nothing about science. I'm the worst when it comes to science, but I'm sure it releases really positive little things in your brain that make you say, yeah, I'm an actor. Hey, I'm an actor. Like it feels good. And I think it validates what you're doing to call yourself the thing that you're doing. So I think that is so important. I mean, even now, I had to do that even as calling myself a writer because I didn't feel comfortable calling myself a writer. I still don't. So that's where I feel kind of like a fraud sometimes because I only started writing to create roles for myself. I intrinsically am not someone who is like, if I don't write, I will die. If writing is my number one way of expression, writing is really hard. I think I write really well collaboratively, much better than I do alone. And I work collaboratively on all my projects, whether it's as a co-writer or developing something with someone or having people involved at all parts of the process to get their opinions, people who I respect. But I would say, I don't know, I'm not really a writer. And that's even something that in the last year and a half, I've had to say, I'm a writer. I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a producer. So I think those labels are huge. Giving yourself permission to give yourself those categorizations are so important. Whether it's how you have those conversations with people when you say who you are and what you do, whether it's, you're filling a form on a website and it says, what do you do? And you fill out that box, whether it's on your, taxes for God's sake or whatever, like what's your business? What's your personal business? Actor, writer, producer, storyteller, comedian, do it, put it on there. I think that's really important. I started writing roles because I didn't want to wait to be cast. I recognized that being in Chicago, I felt like, obviously I didn't have as much experience as many other actors, and that's what I was feeling. But also I have short hair. I'm South Asian, but maybe not South Asian in the way that the roles were being written to be cast. So they wanted somebody who looked a certain South Asian way. Maybe it was the terrorist's wife, or it was the woman from Afghanistan who's, doesn't speak English and wears a hijab. Or it's the woman who looks like a Bollywood actress with long hair and the very stereotypical heteronormative view of femininity. And so I can be those things. I am those things in some variation or part of myself. But if that's all that there is to go in for roles, that's really limiting. And, it doesn't allow for the breadth of what I can do. So that's when I started writing roles. And one of them was, why not write a gay role? So Kim Kardashian kind of came out of that as, someone is gay, is connected to the hyper feminine, most famous family on the planet. So you can connect to the femininity and can understand who this character is through that lens. But then she's brown, she's, quirky, she's lovable, but kind of weird. She's not really good in relationships, but you like her anyway. I mean, she's truly defying what you have to be a woman, a Muslim, a minority, a gay person on camera, but it's okay. She doesn't have to be the model minority for you to root for her. So intrinsically, I guess it was like writing something that I felt like I could be and I already was. Like Kim Kardashian is, the long lost lesbian Kardashian sister, the web series I wrote, that character, I mean, that she's truly an extension of something that I think I am or would like to be or like to play or is just really fun. It's a really fun place for me to be. And I think like some of these roles, like, I don't know if you think about it, some of the greatest roles that people win Oscars for, yes, sometimes they're really transformative, but sometimes they're playing roles that are really intrinsically highlighting aspects of who that actor is. Whether it's something whether it's a quirkiness about them, an awkwardness. And I say all of this with like really celebrating those aspects of those people, whether it's about their physical beauty or their shape, size, look, orientation, something that someone else may have found flawed, but is so perfect for this role. And I think that's really beautiful. And so I think Kim Kardashian for me was a really great process of feeling comfortable owning that this is who I am and this is that who I can be and this is valid and people can watch this and should watch this. And in some ways, if we create it, people will watch it. And maybe, a mainstream, even in the last 3-4 years, content has changed. So maybe in the mainstream, people weren't creating it. But if you create it, people will also watch it. So it's about changing the narrative of what people are watching. Like it's this huge cycle, I think. Like, for example, this really great thing just happened where I was in this meeting with some people, with content creators in LA, and they were talking about what I like to make. And, it's one of those creative meetings you have with people who are interested in you as a content creator and they want to see what your voice is. And I said that I love to obviously create characters that are, or a story where it's about being that identity or that minority. But then also it's really fun for me to just have a really fun situation or awkward situation that has nothing to do with their identity, but by virtue of the fact that they are gay or they are South Asian or they are Muslim, like you're changing what people are used to seeing. So I made a short film called The First Session where there's a couple that's in therapy and it's, I won't give it away because it's a really fun thing to watch, but the situation is what makes it comedically compelling, but it just happens to be two women in couples therapy. And all three of the characters, the women and the therapist, they're all brown. By their names, you can, if you know where they come from, you can figure out that these are Muslim names. But it's not about any of that. It's just a couple getting therapy in a really quirky situation. And so when I was in this meeting, I was talking about that. And I said, for example, the show I started kind of binge watching is Mr. Robot. There's a character in it who's Muslim. And the two people I was having the meeting with, one of them said, wait a minute, what character's Muslim? And I said, oh my God, that's amazing because the character wears hijab, but it's never talked about. It's never discussed. She's Muslim, obviously, but at the same time, no one talks about it. She's just a person in the world who's a tech geek, working in the Mr. Robot world, helping to crack hacker codes and hack. And she was like, she just didn't realize that. And I'm like, that's what's beautiful. That is how you change the narrative. That's one way that's so powerful and it's almost subversive. You know what I mean? So I think that's really powerful and beautiful. And I think that show is a really great example of doing it without talking about it.
Man, I just was reading on social media, all this stuff was getting posted with the hashtag Oscars so white meme. And somebody interviewed, I can't even remember who it was, but somebody interviewed the Coen brothers. And they were getting slammed because someone had said, oh, Hail Caesar is very white. And why aren't you looking for ways to put more diversity into your films? And they kind of were like, well, setting out to create a film by saying, oh, how can we add more diversity to this story is not really the way stories get written. The characters have to come from the story. And so, it's like, I kind of get what they're saying and it just made them look really bad, but they're like, if we're telling a story that happened around certain types of characters in a certain type of setting, it doesn't make sense to say, oh, let's see where we can stick a brown person in here. Because it doesn't make sense because then you're just trying to create diversity for diversity's sake.
I mean, I get that in many ways, right? Because, there are so many roles, for example, this in theater or even film, obviously, but you're like, oh, well, this is set in this time period in Shakespeare. So the lead can't be a brown person. So to use that example, there are only certain, like Shakespeare is almost 90% going to be white, always, except for certain servant characters or Othello,
right.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, so maybe, but at the same time, I think, why not? I mean, if you're wanting to push the envelope, you can. I think Star Wars is a really great example of, was it intentional? And I haven't read up everything on this, but just as having watched the movie and looking at it exclusively, do we think it was intentional that they chose a Black actor to be the hero in the story. I don't know. I haven't read all the stories on it, but what it does is it really helps change the narrative about what is possible in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like those stories have to be all white, but it was really controversial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people had something to say about it. So, and in 1950s Hollywood, I mean, there were some famous Black actors, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I don't even remember what Hail Caesar is about. Well, and actually, you know what? I could take issue with that because why not? I mean, for example, I just watched Spotlight. I mean, white actors have been playing dark-skinned people all throughout the ages.
Uh-huh.
Right? I mean, that's just classically what they've been doing. Whether they're doing it in brownface or blackface or not, they've still been portraying these iconic characters. You know, Jesus, Moses. You know? I mean, if only look at those people, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like that didn't affect our ability to follow the storyline then.
Right.
Right? So it's just the majority talking about the minority. The majority's privilege, I think. And obviously we all have different levels of privilege, right? I mean, there's racial privilege, religious privilege, socioeconomic privilege, gender privilege, orientation privilege, class, city versus small town privilege. So those are all things we juggle at any one given point in time. But the movie example I was going to give is Spotlight. Spotlight stars Mark Ruffalo. Right? He's
Mm-hmm.
nominated for an Oscar in his role. He's amazing. But that character he's portraying, that's a Mexican guy.
Mm.
Nobody's talking about that because,
Mm.
like, fine, the movie isn't about his Mexicanness or his race or his culture. But, I mean, that's an Italian dude playing a Mexican guy. That just is. I mean, you know what I mean? So those things are happening regularly under the radar all the time. So I think it's easy to say, and why not be intentional about it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say, why not? We have to be.
Mm-hmm.
We can't help it. When you are in the minority across any of these communities, you cannot help but be intentional, because if you're not intentional, the Coen brothers aren't going to be intentional for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I only say that based on that statement of theirs alone. So, and why not? If you have that much influence and that much power, why not? You know, if your circle of friends are a Jew, a Mexican, Christian, a Muslim from Egypt, a white dude from Kansas who's Southern Baptist, and the art you create is all white or all not reflective of these communities, then how does that make sense? I mean, I could talk about this forever. I just think it's fascinating, right? And so,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. I mean, so if no one's telling if people aren't going to cast us and tell our stories, or if they are going to tell our stories, but they're either going to compartmentalize us into certain kinds of roles, whether it's fetishized, fantasized, terrorized roles, or weak roles, non-empowered roles, then we have to kind of own up to it. And we have to, I think there is a responsibility. I mean, that's why I'm like, I don't want to wait for the next Slumdog Millionaire movie.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the movie, but it's still not made by people from our culture telling the stories about our culture. So let's make it ourselves.
Do you ever think of yourself as a role model or as a potential role model?
I definitely suffer from, I think I'm a fraud most days. So I look at my life and I think, I don't know if you want to emulate any of this, because you could probably go about this life a lot easier if you just made some different choices earlier or whatever. But I also recognize that, especially given this very specific, South Asian, Muslim, queer, female kind of communities that I'm a part of, it's such a smaller group of people. So I definitely recognize that there are people who are looking at me and saying, thank God you're doing this. And I receive messages and emails and, really moving emails and messages from people thanking me for what I'm doing. But at the same time, I don't fully understand, what the impact is, or who even knows, or who even cares, or who even recognizes it. And you know what I mean? Like, does it matter? Like, I have my days where I'm like, why am I doing any of this? This is dumb. Like, I should just go live in a tiny home on a goat farm in North Carolina somewhere and leave it at that.
Do you ever receive criticism, or do you ever fear pissing people off? Or
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely pissed people off. I've definitely gotten weird messages across the board. I mean, I've had people say, "You're not Muslim enough because you're gay. You're going to hell." You know, people are like, "There's just certain things you shouldn't be talking about, and why are you doing this? And keep your life private." And the only way I could, I think this is why I think maybe I'm also even more motivated to create. Like my first kind of short film that I made, it was a way of, I was wrestling with all these feelings of identity and sexual orientation and a culture. And I made this short film called The Queen of My Dreams. And it was like, I was sort of wrestling with if I'm going to be queer and fiercely, openly, very out queer. And does that mean I have to sacrifice everything I learned and grew up with about being Muslim or South Asian and all of those stories of romance and love and beauty and family and spirituality and culture? And so that first piece of art was the first thing where if I didn't make it, I felt like I couldn't have understood who I was and who I am. And so the internet and technology for me, like starting to just put stuff out there, put things on the internet, make something, take it to festivals. People saw it and then said, "Oh, didn't know anything about my identity," and said, "Wow, I saw that movie." So it was just out there. So for me, the creation and the identity is so deeply entwined. And I think that is what pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes and motivates me as well, because I did sacrifice a lot. You know, I sacrificed a career. I still am paying off law school debt on an actor's salary, which salary is a pretty, a pretty like nice word to call it, right? On an actor's hustle, let's call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's tons of family issues and community issues, and people are not happy about me being as open and out as I am. So for me, I feel some great responsibility to create and push and work so hard to make it all worth it. It's like, well, if I don't keep working hard at this and push myself even harder, then why did I do this in the first place? Why did I give all that up? What have I been doing all these years? It'll all be for naught. So that's my little creature in my head that talks and pushes.
And I truly think every artist, every creator has those voices of self-doubt and like, you know, what will happen if I do this? But then also what will happen if I don't do this? And when we talk about authenticity, it's sort of this ideal, like, oh, that person is so authentic, or that was such an authentic performance, or there's this desire to be authentic and not be an imposter and feel like you're being real. But it sort of sounds like what you're saying is through the creative process and through the work that you do, you uncover more and more of your own identity.
Mm-hmm.
And you're willing to risk the vulnerability of sharing that identity in a way that you can't possibly know if that's going to be of service to other people, but you just have to trust that that unfolding of that process is valuable and is a part of the conversation and is, I mean, you receive feedback that it is valuable for people and that other people who are viewing your work and consuming your work and experiencing it are seeing parts of themselves or things they can identify with, which then helps them get in touch with their identity. Does that sound true?
Yeah. And I think when we're thinking about like why, and I mean, I look at my life and I say, okay, well, when I was looking at movies or TV shows or people out there doing stuff, there weren't a lot of brown people. There weren't any Muslims. There were not really that many queer people. And there were really definitely weren't, you know, the cross sections. So if there were no voices for me to hear or people to look at and faces to see and people to look up to, then that means there's got to be somebody. There needs to be somebody. So in some way, that is motivating as well, that, well, you know, I did this at first for me. And I mean, come on, don't get me wrong. I mean, you're right. I am always processing in everything I do. I'm uncovering something new about myself or discovering or dealing with or just figuring some part of our complex emotional landscape out or understanding it more, forgiving it more, or being more okay with it as I create something. But yeah, there were just no other voices. So, I mean, it definitely felt like, okay, I guess I'm a voice. I don't know if anyone wants to hear it or anyone is listening to it, but I guess I'm a voice doing this thing. And, there are more voices now that are out there, but there's definitely a small group, and people are just very different in how they are out there creating or affecting people. And I think it does matter, I mean, we just shot a crowdfunding video for this feature film that we're shooting in Chicago that I co-wrote and that I'm also going to star in. And this wonderful woman was helping us. And, I found out that she's also, identifies multi-identity. And I just thought, oh my God. Afterwards, I didn't know at the time. And I thought, wow, this must be crazy for her to be hearing me talk so openly as if it's no big deal into a camera. Mm-hmm. And then being like, oh yeah, and it's no big deal, because that just wasn't the narrative that we have been allowed to grow up with. And even though the generations are changing, I mean, there is this majority white culture that is evolving or growing at a very different rate than minority cultures in this country. I mean, for example, gay marriage, just because gay marriage is legal, that means we've come so far politically and socially as a country and as a larger community. But that actually has zero impact on whether my mother will actually ever want to see me marry a woman. Like, negative impact, in fact. So that's also something I think that drives me, is knowing there's this really like kind of mainstream, whether it's right wing or left wing, whatever it is, there's this mainstream narrative that isn't always true for individuals, and so there are so many individuals that they're just alone and sad and have no one to talk to. And, maybe a YouTube video is all they have that they can connect with. I mean, there's this woman, I did my play in Pakistan last year, and there's a woman who came out to me over Facebook Messenger on my, public Facebook page after she saw my show, and she'll send me emails randomly. And one of them recently was, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to like live here and have this relationship that I'm now in privately. I'm so scared of telling anybody, of telling my mom, of telling my family, of anybody finding out. And I mean, we're not past this. We're not in a post, LGBTQ world. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is all important. And so, yeah, we need more people creating. We need more people doing. We need more people talking and sharing. And it's not just for the people who are affected in the sense that like, oh, Fawzia's out there. I am just like Fawzia. I'm queer, Muslim, Pakistani, mm-hmm. and a woman. It's also for the people, maybe a parent of one of those kids, or a brother or a sister. Maybe they'll meet me and they're like, I am not for the gays, but I like Fawzia. Mm-hmm. And I like what she's doing. And the more I connect with her, or when I saw her play, it made me feel something differently, or it made me feel a new emotion I'd never felt about gay people, or about, Muslim people, or whatever. And so that is really important. And if, Donald Trump is any indication of the importance of how much work we have yet to do, every voice, every single relationship that we can have with someone who's different than us, that can maybe affect their viewpoint on that person or that community, I think that matters.
If someone is listening to this conversation and has something that they want to share with the world, a vision, a voice, an idea, something new that maybe she wants to try, but is feeling nervous or feeling scared or unsure as to what to do next, or whether she should do something next, and is hearing that little voice saying, what happens if you do this? What happens if you don't? What piece of advice can you give her?
I think number one, you have to be safe for your own life and your own space and your own community. Everyone's situation is different. Everybody's path is different. And just because we might know someone who's ready at 14 to tell their story to the world, and they're able to do it, and and they're not worried about what anyone thinks, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be your path and your journey. And I feel like that is really, really important, because we need to forgive ourselves and cut ourselves some slack for where we're at with who we are and what we want to do. So I think that is number one priority. Number two, I think it's important that if you want to tell a story, if you want to write, just don't be afraid of trying it and seeing what happens, even if it's private, right? So if it's writing a journal, or maybe even having a conversation for the first time, or going to see a movie you'd never go to, but just engaging in a way that you never have before to see how it feels. I mean, I don't know. I remember I started going to gay bars just because I was like, what is this like? How do I connect here? Having these conversations, what does this mean? I think trying and failing is okay and important. Whatever that means, right? Like, it can mean anything, whether it's just trying to be a human being and telling somebody you like them, or whether it's wanting to do a 5-minute story at a open mic storytelling, or whether it's wanting to go tell a joke at a stand-up comedy open mic night, or make a movie on your cell phone and submit it to a film festival, or have a tough conversation with a family member. I mean, you don't have to sort of jump in all at once. I think you can take baby steps. And also, you will fail, and it's awesome. It's fine. It sucks. It hurts. It feels weird. It's so cliche, but it's so important. I have to read other people's advice regularly to remind myself that failing is essential, and doing things that make you feel uncomfortable are important. So whether that's being in a room of people you've never met, but they're part of a community of writers, but you've never been around writers, but you just want to be a writer, go to an event and put yourself in that room and just see what that feels like. It'll feel uncomfortable, but you'll be so proud of yourself for giving it a shot.
Put yourself in that room. Go to an event. Try out a community of people doing the thing you want to be doing, even though it will feel uncomfortable. I loved what Fawzia said about, I love so much of what she said. She is brilliant, isn't she? But I love what she said about giving yourself the label for the thing that you want to do. It's like that saying, if you want to be, do. Well, she's saying, if you want to do, be. And you can do it in grand, big ways, or you can do it in small, baby steps. Your process, your timeline. It doesn't really matter how you get there. All that matters is that you go there, you try it, you explore it. Don't assume you can't do something just because it hasn't been done yet, or because it hasn't been done by someone like you yet. I could go on and on raving about Fawzia, but I think you're just going to have to check her out for yourself. Go to thecreativeimpostor.com/048 for the show notes. Also, if you are listening in the new Apple Podcasts app in iOS 11, it's awesome because you can easily click the link below the show notes description and it'll take you straight to the episode blog post on my website. Genius. It's also super easy in the new iOS app to rate and review the podcast. So if you have lovely things to say about me or any of my guests, I would love to hear them. And I would love for other people to read them too. So it's super nice when you email them to me or message them to me. It's even better when you tell the world how awesome I am. You can also easily share this episode with someone who you think could get benefit or would enjoy listening to it. So definitely check it out. And if you are not listening on an iPhone, or if you're like me and you have an iPhone 5 or older and can't get the new iOS, sorry about that. Also, you can get Fawzia's bonus rant about the Coldplay video featuring Beyonce when you go to thecreativeimpostor.com/magic and sign up for my email list. You'll also get a creative visualization that you can do to help get you on the right track and keep you going. Finally, please check out Signature Move. If you are in Chicago, you have from September 28th through October 5th to see it at the Music Box Theater. And if you are not in Chicago, head on over to the website and see when your next opportunity to check it out will be. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music is by Jovia Armstrong. And I have one last favor for you. We are getting ready to go into production for season 2 of Power Your Story podcast. This is a podcast produced by my high school student mentees in Chicago. And season 1 posted this summer, and it is awesome. Please listen to it if you haven't already. You can find it, of course, wherever you listen to your podcasts and at poweryourstorypodcast.com. And we'd like to add a new segment, which is Ask a Teen. And so I want to know, what questions have you always wanted to ask a high school student? Like, what is the big deal about Snapchat? Or what kind of music are people listening to these days? Or I don't know, whatever question you could think of that you might like to ask one of my student producers and hear what they have to say. And we need these questions ASAP, like in the first week of October. You can submit these questions easily through my website if you go to thecreativeimpostor.com and click the contact page. If you'd like to record your question as an audio recording, maybe on your phone, or if you have an audio recorder, you can send me the audio file through email to Andrea@infuselife.net. Andrea@infuselife.net. And if we use your question, we will play it in the context of the podcast along with your answer. I thank you so much for listening. And this week, I am wishing you the courage to own the label for the thing you want to do creatively and who you want to be.